Welcome back to third. This is the third video of audio quick tips. This is the second part to the psychoacoustics and the brain's perception of sound. The first one was the how we actually hear the sound and the organs and how it vibrates and all those things. If you want to check that video out, it should be in my list. I could leave a link to make it easier too, but I mean, I've only did the video I think that's the last video I did, so it should be right behind this one, but enough talk. I did want to talk about a few things. I'm not going to be making videos as much as I wanted to. I have other things going on, but I want to leave with the beats combination tones. I want to go into stereo imaging. I'll talk about a synesthesia, and then I'll leave with the mixing handbook. Great read. So with beats, and again, visuals and hearing really help out. So again, we have our old trusty analyzer by Waves. But if you look up to the right, you see another analyzer. This one will help us out in this scenario more than this will here, the Waves one. I'm going to play a tone. First, I want to explain what beats are and then combination tones, and then we'll get into that. So beats are when two tones are played so close together within 20 hertz of each other, they create this pulsating sound, this warping in volume. We really can't discern one tone from the next, but we hear the phenomenon of the pulsating volume. Now we're going to try this out real quick and then we'll get into combination tones. So we're going to show you the beats. Now beats is what happens in the real world. The combination tones is what our brain perceives when we talk about the psychoacoustics, like phantom tones, and we'll get into phantom speaker. But let me show you real quick. So I'm going to play one tone. Now, as we look at the stereo analyzer, we saw a peak. Now I'm going to do it again. You're going to see a peak, a sharp peak. And if you look off to the right to the other analyzer, you'll see a constant wave. Now let's add one more tone. Now look at the peak again and look at the wave to the right again and see the difference. Now, as you could hear, you could hear that there were two different tones, but you really couldn't discern one tone from the other because they're too close together. But as you could see, even the analyzer showed us it's one tone. We saw that there's one peak. The peak had like a shelf on top of it or a plateau, rather than when I played the first one tone, it was just a sharp peak. And if you look off to the right, the wave was pulsating. It was up and down. There were like bigger parts, smaller parts, bigger parts, smaller parts. That's because of that volume modulation, if you will. So let's do it one more time. Okay. Now let's combine two tones that are separated by a few notes. So this will give us a fundamental tone, and this will give us a tone that's a little higher. And you'll see the difference. Let's do it. That sounded much more pleasant because there's not that modulation in volume. And as you can see with the analyzer, it wasn't just one peak. There were two peaks now. And if you look off to the one to the right, it doesn't have that loud, quiet representation in the frequencies. It's just a constant wave. Even though it might pulsate a little, it's still a constant wave. So let's do it one more time so we can see. And there you have it. Now, I want to break down the combination tones really quickly. So combination, let's say this. We have our fundamental tone at 1 kilohertz. We add another tone, let's say at 5 kilohertz. There are two sounds, right? But then we're hearing two other sounds. These are like phantom tones by these other two tones being made up together. The math behind it is this. If we have the 1 kilohertz and the 5 kilohertz, Then you subtract 1 kilohertz from 5 kilohertz. That gives you 4 kilohertz. That's the phantom tone. Then what you do is the 1 kilohertz and the 5 kilohertz, you add those, which gives you 6 kilohertz. And that's the other phantom tone. So we're hearing 4 tones, but only 2 are being played. So let's see if you can hear it. Most people say they can't hear it. I'm not going to lie. When I first started doing it, I couldn't hear it. But I think the more and more you do music and you're listening to music through headphones and you understand it, you're able to pick apart sounds a lot more easier than the average person. I wanted to move into stereo imaging. Stereo imaging, well, first, stereo imaging, I didn't do my research, so I don't know what year that was introduced, but in the beginning, everything was monophonic. You remember the old, like the monophonic record players, like the record players that had that big horn? That's in mono. That's one sound. It's just one source. And then there came a point in time where we took one mono, another mono, we put them together, and now we have stereo. So from that one mono and that other mono put together, in the middle, and I'm going to put a graphic up, that's the phantom speaker. And it's very important to know this phantom speaker because it helps out in mixing so much. Now, when music is played back on our electronic devices, not saying like car stereos or anything, but if you're listening to your music on your iPad or your iPhone or anything like that, or your Galaxy, whatever the case may be, is being played back in mono. And I'm going to get to mixing in mono really quick. But with the stereo imaging, it helps out a lot if you have like studio monitors. Now I'm talking to the engineers right now. The way I set mine, and this is how they say you can find the sweet spot with your monitors and how, you position yourself with the monitors. I have 3 feet of space between the 3 of us. One monitor I have is set up with soundproofing behind it. Soundproofing does wonders too. I really don't want to get into that because that's going to get off track. But I have soundproofing behind my monitor. Then 3 feet from that first monitor, I have my other monitor set up to the right with soundproofing. And in the middle of the 2 monitors, I have more soundproofing because that's where the phantom speaker lies. Now, I can tell you from experience. Now, I also have 2 soundproofing panels to the left and the right of me. So where my ears would sit, I have soundproofing there. So I'm not getting a whole bunch of reflection. And I don't have any soundproofing behind me, but the wall is far back enough where the standing waves aren't really going to interfere with the way I mix. Now, if the wall was a lot closer, like a wall behind me was a lot closer, I would have to put soundproofing behind that because it's going to alter the way I mix. But I will tell you, before I put the soundproofing up, I did notice more phasing, like just the clashing of the frequencies. And after I put the soundproofing up, it sounds a lot clearer. But with stereo imaging, the important thing to know is mix in mono and then convert it to stereo. Or you can mix in stereo and check your mix in mono. So you have phase issues if you do a mix, you check it in mono, and it falls apart. Now, here was one that was free. I don't think it's free anymore. I got this maybe a year ago. Now, maybe even more than that, because I think they're on Ozone 9 now. But this has, if you can see, it's a mono button here. So we click that, and now you can hear everything in mono. Let's click it off. And there's other things out there. There are probably free VSTs where you can switch from. I know the Isotope Vinyl VST is free. And I think that has a switch on there where you can check from mono or stereo to mono. But again, if you have studio monitors, what I used to do all the time, I would just mix out of one studio monitor and let that play back. If I get a good mix out of that one, there was one time where I only had one studio monitor. And my mixes came out pretty nice. So mixing in mono is very important. Again, along with mixing at very low levels, these things will give you decent mixes. Synesthesia. I had to scratch my head for a minute. Synesthesia. I wanted to end with synesthesia, or actually wrap up the learning portion with synesthesia. Synesthesia is a phenomenon where your senses are kind of meshed together. When we're born, our senses are pretty much like grouped together, and then as we develop, they kind of take on their own identities. But people who have synesthesia, this never happens. So you have two senses that are tied together. So I can hear somebody's name and I'm seeing a color. Or I could see something and then start tasting, but it's not contrived. It's something that is involuntary. I had to tell myself that because when I first learned about it, I'm like, I got it. No, you don't. I don't have it. But also when you do hallucinogens, and marijuana is a hallucinogen. Even alcohol is a hallucinogen when taking enough of it. But I'm talking about these hardcore LSD and like certain mushrooms. These will actually intensify your senses. So if you go back and you look at some videos from the 60s when LSD was at its peak, a lot of those videos were psychedelic videos. There's a lot of colors flashing. They knew people were taking these drugs. So you take the drug, you're listening to music, and then you see the visuals. Check out a lot of the Beatles and their videos back in that time. Yellow Submarine and all that. That's psychedelic music. So they already knew this phenomenon. So we're going to give the listener a trip. You take this, you're listening, and then you're seeing these colors. But people with synesthesia, they don't need drugs, or they don't need, like in my case, I wouldn't say I forced it, but I would listen to music and close my eyes and I would see colors with my eyes closed. I don't see them with my eyes open. I see colors with my eyes closed, but I will say from mixing more and more, when I'm mixing music out of that phantom speaker, I can kind of see it. It's very, very, very faint. It's not like I'm seeing colors, but I feel energy and I just see a little something, but it's very faint. But people with synesthesia, it's a little more intense. You would never know unless you had it. I don't know how intense these colors are when they hear certain sounds. A horn might be green and a bass might be purple. Who knows? They just see it in names and things of that nature. It's not just sounds per se. It's just hearing certain things like names. They attach names to colors and shapes and things of that nature. But I wanted to bring that up because I love different types of phenomenons that we really can't experience for ourselves. You know, just to step into the shoes for a second and I'm gonna listen to this album and just see colors. And I think that's pretty dope. But to wrap this video up, I did want to leave. Again, I'm not going to be doing too many more videos for a while. I want to get this other stuff out the way. But one thing that helped me was a mixing guide. Bob Owinski. I had the second edition. Coming out of college, I guess you call it college, the Art Institute, whatever. I had a good understanding of a lot of things, but picking this book up, it just elevated me to another level because there were a lot of things that weren't taught in school. So you have to understand these are mixing pros, engineers who have years and years in the business, and they have audio secrets, and they come out with books. The general knowledge that is given at an institution, university, college, or whatever are coming from these books. And you might not cover the entire book. You might just, I don't know how many classes I've had where we didn't cover the entire book. We'd cover sections and do, intense research on those sections. But to read the entire book and to have it for yourself, I think the beauty about school is you have like-minded people around you. And then when you do projects and things of that nature, that's very fun. But then the most important element is you have a teacher there who, anytime you don't understand something or if you have questions, they can break it down for you. But the beauty of the internet now is if you don't understand something, you can type it in and then it'll just have a whole, write up about that one section. If I'm reading a section about psychoacoustics and we're learning about all these things, and then something comes out about combination tones, I can look up combination tones and there's a whole write up about it. So that's the beautiful thing. But I'm going to put the graphic up, the Bob Owinski. I read the second edition. He might be up to the fourth or fifth edition. It might be more than that because I read this maybe like 3 years ago. But whatever edition you get, and it doesn't even have to be Bob Owinski. This is just the one that helped me out. There's probably many, many other books out there. And if you don't like reading, then there's videos. Go on YouTube and look up videos. But I want to wrap this up. I actually like doing this. But again, I want to get these other ideas out of the way. I can always come back and do the quick tips. And there's already a wealth of information out there, So if you really want to dedicate yourself to learn mixing and mastering and more about psychoacoustics and setting up your studio and mic placement and how to sound treat, there's so many things that you could do to improve the way you mix and master. The most important thing is trusting your ears. And you have visual cues now. You have these tools here, that the stereo imaging and the frequency spectrum analyzers and all these things that you can actually see it to kind of confirm what you're hearing. So with all that being said, I go by RM. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, peace.